But thank you so much for having me. And I want to start by paying tribute to the local community groups that have been very, very active over the years in calmly and professionally setting out the case for why this application wasn't the right one. And it has been a genuine privilege to work closely with them for the last few years leading to this moment. And today I want to set out the grounds on which I believe this appeal and the application should be dismissed. They are fivefold: failure to meet the high bar needed for release of Greenbelt, weak and uncertain economic benefits, conflict with local development plan, wider development harms, and lack of public support. So this application has, I would say consistently, I've been involved since sort of the start of this, consistently failed to meet the higher bar required to relinquish Greenbelt land and to get anywhere near mitigating the traffic impacts, despite the generous time Buckinghamshire Council and Strategic Sites Committee afforded the application to have a second go when it was originally deferred. And traffic was a very large mitigating factor in that. Let me turn first to Greenbelt, and I quote from the planning officer's report: would constitute inappropriate development and would result in very significant spatial and visual harm to openness of Greenbelt and in significant loss of open countryside and be in conflict with the fundamental purpose of Greenbelt policy. I have said this consistently from the onset of my objection, and I agree with the planning officers on this point. The Greenbelt matters, and it is why I have campaigned tirelessly to strengthen those rules, both when in government and now in opposition. And it is the grounds alone, I believe, to reject this. And this is why it was rejected at the strategic sites stage. And it remains the case today. Now, please, I beg you, please don't fall for the argument that this is poor quality Greenbelt. It is emphatically not. It is demonstrated by the representation from statutory and other stakeholders as important Greenbelt land. Now, I believe the new government is choosing to weaken Greenbelt protection, but I suspect the applicant's appeal was in part emboldened by a belief that planning relaxation would come their way prior to this inquiry. But even against the revised national planning policy framework on Greenbelt, this application falls at the first hurdle. I know you'll be familiar with the revised Greenbelt provision, but it seems appropriate to reiterate, since why not? We're here on a Friday and it's day 12, so why not reiterate the 5 purposes of Greenbelt? To check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, to prevent neighboring towns merging into one another, to assist in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment, to preserve the setting and special characteristics of historic towns, and to assist in urban regeneration by encouraging the recycling and derelict of other urban land. This part of Greenbelt is clearly serving a number of those purposes, and the original planning officer's recommendation to the Strategic Sites Committee remains pertinent. I repeat, it would constitute inappropriate development and would result in very significant spatial and visual harm to the openness of the Greenbelt and in significant loss of open countryside and in conflict with the fundamental purpose of Greenbelt policy. Now, the key test remains as set out in 153 of the NPPF. When considering any planning application, local planning authorities should ensure that substantial weight is given to any harm to the Greenbelt, including harm to its openness, inappropriate developments, and inappropriate development is by definition harmful to Greenbelt and should not be approved except in special circumstances. And again, quoting from the NPPF, very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to Greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm resulting from the proposal is clearly outweighed by other considerations. The applicants have, it seems to me, persisted to try to argue that the economic case for their development clearly outweighs anything else. And I'll set out later why this is not only the case now, but is not a tenable position for the future. But it has now disappeared without a trace thanks to the economic market realities set out just last week by Pinewood Studios. We have had 154 and 155 of the revised NPPF to consider in terms of appropriate development in Greenbelt. This application meets none of those criteria. It also meets none of the criteria of 155 either, taking two specific areas in respect to A, this land has not been designated as gray belt, and B, there is no unmet need as Pinewood Studios and other studios exist in the locality and indeed are now underutilized, as you were so eloquently pointing out earlier today about your visits, which is wonderful to see, so you can see geographically how close all of these studios actually are. And let me now turn to the key myth I would love to bust this morning, that there is an economic case for this development. The film industry has and is a significant contributor to the UK economy, and I am proud to support the fantastic film school in my constituency that helps to produce most of the talent used in the industry. But this is an industry where the demand for film studios is falling, and this demand simply will not create local jobs. Let me turn first to demand. As I set out in my contribution to the Strategic Sites Committee, when it considered this application, according to the British Film Institute data, HETV and film production fell 40% in 2023. The latest figure from the BFI clearly show that the UK production industry is continuing to suffer. Full year expenditure for 2023 is lower than anticipated and growth remains weak. Whilst feature film production appears to have recovered from the Hollywood strikes, spending on high-end television is well below the peaks seen in 2022. This reflects the structural changes taking place within the streaming industry, changes that I believe will have a long-term impact on UK inward investment. The demand trend is emphatically downwards, and with so many film studios already in our vicinity, the case for a further studio is simply not there. These studios, by their very nature, also have most people coming in from across the country or from overseas, then leaving post-production, meaning there will be no local jobs created. We also now have very specific proof points that demand for studios is falling. Pinewood Studios issued a press release on the 30th of January announcing a public consultation on shifting the focus on its planned expansion away from the studio growth to a mixed-use development due to falling demand, with the CEO saying, "We are a dynamic business in a fast-moving industry, and we are committed to invest in the ongoing expansion of Pinewood Studios. The reduction in global content production, combined with rising construction costs and business rates, triggered a review of our existing planning consent, and we believe the revised proposals provide a credible alternative." So, Pinewood, also in my constituency, so they're both in my area, is an established world-renowned studio and has had to change its expansion plans due to falling demand. Where does the applicant think its demand will now come from? I noted that during this inquiry, the applicant's economic expert had to guide their own estimate of 4,000 jobs, saying it was unreliable. I would argue it is not only unreliable, it is simply not going to materialize. This gets to the heart of the weakness of this application. Even if you don't share my own view that the economic case is very, very weak, the reality is that the economic case is at best uncertain, unreliable, and prone to market change. Pinewood is a real, near, and compelling proof of this fact. To allow a film studio to meet the high bar needed to release Greenbelt, lose that Greenbelt, but then find an unused studio irreversibly in its place, would be wrong and catastrophic. The applicants have never been able to answer this basic question. All of the potential sites for the film studio in the UK is there really only this patch of greenbelt available for this site? But this application also fails in other key tests. The traffic impacts are severe and significant, and the applicant has failed time and time again to grasp the magnitude of the disruption that this would have on Marlow and the surrounding areas. We already have significant traffic congestion around the area, and this will only continue to intensify it. This is because it simply cannot be mitigated. This is further grounds for refusal, as Buckinghamshire Highways have set out, and I think you're going to hear from them later today. The NPPF again sets out clearly that development in the Greenbelt also need regard to both 110 and 115. 110, the planning system, should achieve managed patterns of growth in support of these objectives. Significant development should be focused on locations which are or can be sustainable through limiting the need to travel and offering a genuine choice of transport models. This can help to reduce congestion and emissions and improve air quality and public health. However, the opportunities to maximize sustainable transport solutions will vary between urban and rural areas, and this should be taken into consideration in both planning and making decisions. 115 is assessing sites that may be allocated for development in plans or specific applications for development. It should ensure that A, sustainable transport models are prioritized, taking account of the vision for the site, the type of development, and its location. B, safe and sustainable access to the site can be achieved for all users. C, the design of streets, parking areas, and transport elements and the content associated standards reflect current national guidance, including the National Design Guide and National Model Design Code 48. And D, any significant impact from development on transport networks in terms of capacity and congestion or on highway safety can be cost-effectively mitigated to acceptable degrees through a vision-led approach. And you have all that to look forward to after what I'm saying, so I don't want to give too much away from the highways. This application demonstratedly fails both of these tests despite having months to try to find ways to meet them. It couldn't because this is the wrong development in the wrong location. There are then also the harms that were set out so clearly and compellingly by the planning officers and accepted by the Strategic Sites Committee to the AONB, to Little Marlow Country Park, and to the heritage of the area, just to name a few. Crucially, this is in controversy to the 5 local development plan policies. The local plan matters and should be a significant weight in this decision. Finally, I hope over the course of this inquiry, it has become clear that development is strongly opposed by my constituents. The weight of individual objections is clear. The parish poll was decisive. Let me briefly say that the parish poll was extraordinary. I know a bit about getting people to vote in elections, and it's not as easy as you think. It's a lot harder than you think. And turnout was comparable to local government by-elections despite significantly short time periods to vote, no polling cards being issued. There was no reminders sent out to people and no postal votes. So the result was emphatic and decisive, and an impressive voter turnout for this was something that I've never seen before, actually, in a parish poll. So to conclude, Greenbelt test not met either before the revised NPPF or after. Traffic impacts not mitigated. Conflicts with 5 policies of the local development plan, harms to the AONB, Little Marlow Country Park, and the residential amenities in the area, an economic case that is weak and worsening and blown away by the practical realities put in the public domain by an established world-renowned film studio just miles away. This has also been a bad application with little future, the wrong development at the wrong time in the wrong location, causing significant harms. I hope that you will dismiss this appeal, bring a final end to this application, and allow this Greenbelt land to be retained. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.